Hello again. In this video, we'll look into a pivot table timeline to filter dates. Instead of adjusting filters to show dates, we can use a pivot table timeline. It's a dynamic filter option that lets us easily filter by date or time and zoom in on the period we want with a slider control. A timeline allows us to filter a pivot table based on dates, like using a slicer. And it is possible to add multiple timelines to the same pivot table if required. Now, let's get a quick look at the data and create a pivot table. We have the transaction date and product sold, then the region where the product is sold, then the salesperson's name. Next is the number of units sold, then sales amount, and finally, the cost of the items sold. Okay, now, let's create a pivot table quickly on a new worksheet. Drop region into rows, and drop name into rows and units into the values. Here we have our pivot table. Now, let's move to the timeline. Now, a timeline can be created from any date field available to the pivot table without having to add the field into the report. To create a timeline, click inside the pivot table. That requires the timeline. Click Pivot Table, Analyze, and then Insert Timeline. In the Insert Timeline dialog box, only the date field will be available. Select the field or fields that each need a timeline, and click OK. If necessary, once the timeline has been created, click the time level indicator in the top right of the timeline and select the required option. We will keep it to the month. Now, customize a timeline. Timelines can be customized in a variety of ways. Excel provides a dedicated contextual ribbon tab when a timeline is selected. When a timeline covers your pivot table data, we can move it to a better location and change its size. We can also change the timeline style, which may be useful if we have more than one timeline. To move the timeline, simply drag it to the location we want, and to change the size of the timeline, click it, and then drag the sizing handles to the size we want, or we can resize from here from the ribbon. To change the style of the timeline, click it to display the timeline tools, and then options, and then pick the style we want from the timeline styles. This is all about the pivot table timeline filter. I hope this tutorial is helpful using the timeline, and if you like this video, then please give the video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to see more videos like this. Also, if you want to see me cover any other topics on this channel, then leave a note down below in the comments. That's all I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, I hope to see you next time.